for that nice introduction. I want to start off by saying my name is John McManus, and I approve this message. Now that might sound a little like I'm running for office of some kind. No, I'm not. Did you know that the British never run for office? They stand for one. Being of Irish heritage, I hate to admit that the British may have something there. Some years ago, a visitor from England came across the ocean to see for himself what the John Birch Society was all about. At the time, we were headquartered in Massachusetts. We're now headquartered in Wisconsin. But over 2 days, several of us showed this British fellow around, and he was very impressed. I took him out to Lexington and Concord to visit the American shrines where the breakaway from Mother England began. It was most enjoyable to tell this Englishman all about John Hancock and Sam Adams and the forcible resistance to the Redcoats. As you're probably aware, some 800 British regulars had marched all the way from Boston in order to seize the guns of the farmers. Back then, virtually every American knew that anyone who wanted to take their gun wanted to take their liberty. So I made sure my British acquaintance knew what the King's men were after. It was more fun telling a Brit than telling any American. Soon he smiled and started to refer to me as a colonist. I smiled back and told him he had a funny accent. And I suggested that it was absolutely terrible what he and his countrymen had done to our language. Well, he laughed out loud and our friendship was sealed. For a moment, let's go back more than 30 years and recall that there were many celebrations marking our nation's bicentennial. At one, there was a fellow who dressed himself up as King George, and he showed up at an affair. He muscled his way to the podium, and he was feigning anger. The MC was feigning anger at being so rudely interrupted. And he said to King George, he said, "Who are you and what do you want?" Well, the regally dressed intruder said, "I'm King George III, and I've come back from the grave to ask modern-day Americans a question." "Okay, King George, what's your question?" King George looked out at a large audience and he said, "How do you like taxation with representation?" That's a good question. Now, unlike Dick Cheney, I'm not a hunter.
He isn't either.
But I have a story about one very avid duck hunter who took a friend along one cold and dreary morning. The friend had never done this before. And the two were sitting in this little boat with their guns and their duck retrieving dog when they spotted some ducks. The hunter pointed his gun, fired, one of the ducks came floating down, and the dog was told to go fetch. Well, this was quite a different dog. He walked out on the water, he grabbed the duck, and he walked back on top of the water. He never got wet. The friend was amazed. Immediately, more ducks, another shot, another command to fetch. And the dog again walked out on the water, got the duck, and walked back. So the very proud hunter said to his somewhat stunned friend, "Say," he said, "did you notice anything different about my dog?" And the friend said, "Yeah, he can't swim." Ladies and gentlemen, he missed the point. And when it comes to understanding what our founding fathers were so insistent about, I find that most Americans also miss the point. Everywhere you turn in America today, ordinarily decent people see a problem, and their response is that government ought to do something. They have missed perhaps the greatest and most important point that undergirds America's greatness. It is that the United States of America didn't become the greatest nation on earth because of what government did. It became the envy of the world because of what government was prohibited from doing. the point. Throughout my lifetime, various leaders have essentially told us that they can do whatever they aren't specifically prohibited from doing by the Constitution. And that's backwards, dangerously backwards. James Madison is rightly known as the father of the Constitution. In one of the Federalist essays written by him to explain the Constitution, he said, "The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite." Did you get that?
Oh, yes.
Few and defined. Everything else left to the state governments and the people themselves. Madison said that the few and defined powers would deal with war, peace, and contacts with foreign nations. And to the states was left the rest. Madison was aware, as were all the early Americans, that the states created the federal government, not the other way around. There's an old adage that tells us that the creature can't legitimately become more powerful than its creator. But the federal government has far exceeded the power of the states, its creator. And our nation suffers greatly because of this development. A full appreciation of the brilliance of our nation's founders is that they left the states virtually alone so that they could compete with each other to be the best state. The one way you'd want to raise a family, build a business. They knew that competition spawns excellence. And it did in America for a long time. A few vestiges of competition amongst the states still exist. For instance, only one state of the 50 has no income tax and no state sales tax. Yeah. You all know it's right here. The live free or die granite state of New Hampshire. No state income tax, no state sales tax, and it's the only one of the 50 that can say that. My home is in neighboring Massachusetts. People are surprised to learn that the president of the John Birch Society lives in what is arguably the most liberal state in the Union, the home of Ted Kennedy, John Kerry. But I can explain. I can explain. I tell anyone who asks that I like to work behind enemy lines.
Stand for that one.
One of New Hampshire's great champions of limited taxation was the late Governor Meldrum Thompson. I was fortunate to get to know him quite well because he was a member of the John Birch Society. He believed that the people should be left alone to keep the fruits of their labor. How revolutionary. He believed that government should be a very limited servant, not a demanding master. Had he been a younger man, he might well have succeeded in becoming President of the United States. Now, we're all here today because we want to take our country back. And we will. It becomes more obvious every day that America's sleeping giant is awakening. This is all very exciting. Let me offer another story. U.S. Navy ship steaming along one night when the lights ahead flashed, signaled, "Turn your ship 5 degrees to starboard." Well, the ship's captain was quite indignant about this. And so he told his signalman, "You send a message back, you turn your ship 5 degrees to starboard." And that prompted an immediate response. No, you turn your ship 5 degrees to starboard." Well, now the captain of the Navy vessel was very irate. He told his man to send the following message. He said, "I'm a captain, United States naval vessel. You turn your ship to starboard." And the final message came right